Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video. And this video is going to be a continuation in my Earth to Phobos video series that I'm putting together. In the last part of the video, we took a look at the spreadsheets that I made. We took a look at this spreadsheet and this spreadsheet so that we could do all of our calculations to make sure that we would in fact have everything set up that needed to be set up so that we could make this trip from Earth out to Mars. And at the conclusion, toward the end there, I was kind of pointing out how with just 50% main fuel, I would have enough delta V to make the trip. I would have more than enough delta V to make the trip all the way out to Mars. And in fact, we would end up at Mars with somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 delta V left. And after I did that, right after I finished that part just a few minutes ago, I was kind of thinking, well, that's an awful lot of delta V to have left over when you arrive at your destination. And I kind of like to slide in on fumes whenever I can. So I thought, well, what if I cut that down to 25%? And if we cut down to 25%, then we have this much delta V from starting from low Earth orbit. We have 3,747. And we need 3,586.65 to complete the injection burn. So that gives us just barely enough. I mean, that's not a lot of delta V to spare. But also, once we complete that, so let's say we do that burn at 3,747 minus the cost here, which is 3,586.65. That leaves us with 160 meters per second for mid-course corrections. Plus, we will gain over the course of the flight, we will gain 836 meters per second due to LOX consumption. So by the time we arrive at Mars, if let's say that we had 0 mid-course corrections, by the time we arrive at Mars, we would have a total amount of delta V of about 1,000 meters per second, something like that. So, hello, I needed to interrupt the part of the video that you were just watching where I was talking about the DV that I would gain due to LOX consumption. There was a pretty major error in that particular part of the explanation, and I don't feel like I could really explain it with an on-screen annotation, so I wanted to record a separate video, and I'm just going to insert it right after the part that you just saw, and then we'll go back to the rest of the video. Now, I was explaining how I reconfigured the XR2 so that we would only have 25% main fuel, so that basically the flight would be pretty complicated, would be more complicated by the fact that we would have less DV to go with. But I was explaining that we would have a delta V gain of 835 meters per second. Actually, I think it was 836 in the video, but here I've got a couple of decimal points. That's not going to be the case, and here's the thing. What I said is true, that we will gain delta V due to LOX consumption, but it's not going to be anywhere near this number. What I completely forgot to include in my original equation is this here, the cost of the injection burn. So this number is accurate. It is true if we were going from Earth to Mars and this was our vessel configuration after we completed the ejection burn. So if we were on our way to Mars with a total delta V of 3,747 meters per second, so, in other words, the burn was already done, then we would gain 835.63 meters of delta V per second due to the LOX consumption. But that's not what we're doing. We're not going to Mars with this much delta V left over. We're starting from low Earth orbit with this much delta V total. Then we're going to do a burn, and the amount of fuel that we have left over after that is what we need to take into consideration with regards to our DV gain due to LOX consumption. Now, the amount of delta V that we're going to go through for the injection burn, we already know that because we saw that in the other spreadsheet. and that's going to be 3,586.65. So let's plug that number in, 3586.65. And once we plug that figure in, now we know the real picture of how much DV we're going to gain due to LOX consumption. So we're starting with this much delta V total. This is going to be the cost of our burn to go out to Mars. It's going to be really close to this number, plus or minus, a meter per second. Once that burn is done, this is how much delta V we're going to have left immediately after the burn is done, is 160.38. So then between the time that we do the ejection burn and fast forward time to go out to Mars, we're going to burn through all this LOX, and burning through all that LOX is going to net us an additional 38.88 meters per second. So if we add these two numbers together, we end up with 199, right about 200 meters per second total. And that would be assuming that we didn't do any mid-course corrections. The fact that we will be doing mid-course corrections means that this will be even less. There is a way to calculate how much less it would be, but in this particular flight, I don't really feel like it's important. Basically, you would just do this again. You would say, what is going to be the cost of your mid-course corrections? Then that's how much delta V you've got left after that. And then that's how much delta V you have due to LOX consumption, taking into account the mid-course corrections as well. But it was really important to point this out because there's a huge difference between 38 meters per second and 836 meters per second. If you are trying to do a mission where you're on a really, really tight budget and you're expecting to show up at your target with an extra, 800 plus meters per second, and when you get there, you actually only have, 40 meters per second, well, that's all the difference in the world between success and failure. So it's absolutely, it was a huge mistake on my part explaining it the way I did. So I felt it was absolutely necessary to come back and do this little video insert to just explain the real story. So again, in this flight that we're doing here, we're only going to gain about 39 meters per second between the time that we leave Earth and the time that we arrive to Mars. Okay, that's it, and I will now return back to the original video. If our calculations are accurate and we fly really well, then we should be able to make the trip. Now, what I want to find out, basically, that's not leaving a lot of margin for error. Let me think about how much margin for error that actually leaves us. So if we're saying the total trip, it's going to be that number, 3676.24 times 1.1. So in other words, an additional 10%. Then we would need 43 total. So we're not even leaving ourselves with the 10% margin of error if I'm doing that basic calculation correct. So let's give this a try. I kind of think it might not work because this is cutting it so close. I should go for 35% or something like that, but I'm really curious just to find out if we can get away with this. So let me bring that scenario back up. You can see here I've cut the fuel all the way down to 25%. And if we look at our ship's mass, 30901.3, that is exactly the same as we have in our rocket equation. So we know that all this is correct. Now, the only thing we need to do to get underway is to find the right time to launch. So let's go VW to the escape plan. And what we want is a 90-degree heading, or as close to it as possible. It's not terribly important to get that for the sake of the HCLV, but if you were, launching and your launch delta V was a major concern, then you would definitely want to make sure you're launching it as close to 90 degrees as possible so that you're getting benefit from the Earth's rotation. So let's see, as we go forward in time, looks like our heading is initially getting a bit worse. So let's just go forward here. And just have to bear with me. There's nothing I can do till we get forward a bit. And we might have to use the scenario editor to bump the date back and forward by an hour here and there until we find the heading that we need. So let me set this and find out what our heading is right now. So we are at 312 on that side. Let's swing it around the other way. .130 on this side, so if we go forward, hopefully it's getting closer to 90, and it looks like it is, sort of. It's actually starting to go up now. Let's see, 130, that's not a very good heading. Go forward a little bit more. Sometimes from a particular launch site, you just can't get a 90-degree heading, you know, depending on where you're going. In this case, we're going to Mars. All right, let me flip around to the other side. So that's actually northwest. That's terrible. That's definitely not going to work. Let's go this way. Okay, let me use the scenario editor to back up a little bit. Let me check the time real quick. The eject date's what I mean. 58243. Okay, we haven't come up to the eject date yet, so we can still go forward in time a little bit. But I don't think it's getting any better. So that heading is straight south. So now we definitely want to flip around the other way. Okay, that heading's 35. See, now we're getting closer to 90. But now we're already going back the other way. So basically, we're going to be 45 degrees to the north or 45 degrees to the south. We're not going to be able to get 90. So we're either going to have a launch heading of about 45 or a launch heading of about 130. So the launch date, 58243, we're pretty close to that number. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll take this heading of about 45 degrees. All right. Let me do a quick save here and then switch over to the HCLV. Now we're going to go back and we're going to inherit the plan from the XR2, execute. Okay, and now we'll load the escape plan on that side, view the eject orientation. Now we'll bring up the HCLV Hyperion control over here. And that one, target heading is going to be 44 point, let's put in 60 because I think it's going down. And a target APA, 200 kilometers. Okay, now let me just think about things for a moment, and then we'll get underway. Okay, I do need to switch back to the XR2 real quick. Control F3. And we need to turn off external cooling.
Using onboard O2.
And
re-entry check. All systems green.
Just making sure everything's closed up, and the easiest way to do that is to do a re-entry check. But I just want to make sure the radiator's closed and everything else is closed. So everything's closed. Control F3 back to the Hyperion control. Control H to bring up the HUD. Alt H to change the color. And is there anything that I'm not thinking about or not thinking of? Just bear with me, we're almost underway. Somebody told me that I need checklists, and I absolutely agree. That way I don't have to sit here and go through the mental list. But the problem with the checklist is that I don't really, especially when I'm doing videos, I don't really do the same exact flight more than once, at least not exactly the same. So it's kind of hard to like make a checklist, in this case. All right, I think we're set, and if not, I've got a quick save from a few seconds ago, so we're good. All right, let's launch. Change over to surface. The only thing I might have to do here is I might have to input a slightly different heading as we go up on our ride to orbit in order to make sure that the relative inclination is as low as it can get. Other than that, we're going to trust the HCLV autopilot. Let's switch over to another color already because we're high enough in the atmosphere that their color's not showing up very well. See relative inclination coming down. That's good. Take a quick look at the external view. One of the benefits of using an autopilot, you can kind of look outside and just have something for the sake of the video playback. Changing the mode, pressing F2, because sometimes the modes are set in such a way that it rotates the whole frame, and I don't like that. One thing I do like about, well, I absolutely love this launcher. I think I've stated that when I did the Earth to Ganymede and a couple of other flights. This launcher is abso-freaking-lutely amazing. I love it. One thing that's really cool about it, I think, is just the animations that it does when it separates the boosters, which I'm not sure how long that'll take, but it'll be coming up here shortly. Something else I should do real quick. Let me get inside the cockpit of the XR2.
Re-entry check.
Okay, just making sure the mission elapsed timer started. Okay, so back to the HCLV. Relative inclination still coming down. And yeah, if you watch this animation here, when the boosters separate, it's a really cool looking animation. And just the way this whole system's set up, it's got the XR2 mounted, it shows the mounting brackets so that it's not just generically laying on the side. And it's more than capable of lifting a fully loaded XR2 into orbit. There they are. Not a great looking animation. There's a couple of other vertical launchers I've looked at. If you go back to that Earth to Venus video I did where I mounted the XR2 to the top of the Falcon Heavy, that was pretty ugly looking. So this is just a beautiful launcher. Anyway, back inside, let's watch our relative inclination. It is still coming down. That's good. And bring up orbit MFD, projection ship, distance PEA APA, set the frame of reference to the equator, although in this case it doesn't really matter what the frame of reference is. See the time to the node coming down, so the autopilot is doing its job, keeping the vessel in an efficient launch profile. If we look at surface MFD, we should see, vertical speed coming down, negative vertical acceleration. Wow, we are pulling some G's. That's 918.27 would be 3 G's, so we're like 3.2, 3.5, something like that. Relative inclination still coming down. We're about 3 degrees out though, so I probably want to getting really close to orbital velocity. So let's start changing the heading just ever so slightly. Let's go 46, see if that's the right direction. You probably want even more than that. Let's go 50 degrees because that's the wrong direction. So 42. Just changing the heading a little bit to make sure that the relative inclination comes down. I really don't want to arrive in orbit 3 degrees out of plane. That's not very good. Go a little bit more because we're getting really close to orbital velocity, so that's going to be cutting out quite soon. So right now we're kind of pushing the vessel, yawing a bit. That's really not going to be enough. Let's do some more. Yeah, I should have started that process a little bit sooner, but you can see the relative inclination is coming down, and we're going to have engine cut off here pretty quick. And we got about a half orbit, not quite a half orbit. Okay, so we're 1.38 degrees out, and let's see if we can improve that a little bit here. Let's do an adjustment. Bring the white line closer to our current location. That's actually one thing I forgot to do during the write up, and that will indicate that the relative inclination is lower because before it was back here. So with the... Okay, now the line of nodes actually shows you which way you need to orient, because you've got the bubble here that's not filled in and the bubble there that is filled in. The problem is I can't remember which one of these is anti-normal and which one is normal. So what we're going to do now, we're going to shut off the autopilot because it has basically done its job, and I don't want it to circularize the orbit for me necessarily. Actually, yes, I do, because we're going to be coming up to apoapsis before we reach the eject point, so we'll have to take care of that manually. But for now, a slightly higher priority is to get ourselves a little bit better in plane, and we'll do that here when our position crosses the white line there. The one thing, again, I'm not sure of is if I need to be orbit plus or orbit minus, and you can know, because this bubble is not filled in. I can see that here. I don't know how well it shows up in the video playback, but this one's not filled in. This one is. So I'm just going to have to guess. We're going to go normal plus. Let's see, ascending node. I used to have a little bit of a memory trick that I would use to remember, like ascending node is filled in or something like that, but I don't remember which way it was. So we're going to come around to normal plus, do a little bit of a test fire to see if we are oriented the right way. If not, we still have time to orient the other direction. And we also have to set up a maneuver. So we've got, if we were here, that'd be 45 minutes. So here we've only got about 20 minutes or so to set up that maneuver. Okay, a little bit of a test burn. And we are oriented the right way. So we'll go ahead and just do that burn now. So if the bubble is not filled in, then it's normal plus. I have to try to remember that. Yeah, anti-normal is filled in. Anti-normal is filled in. So correcting the relative inclination, since we arrived in orbit greater than 1 degree out of plane, not very good. So we're just going to fix that here. And we need to adjust that white line around to here. A little bit more. Okay, a little bit more of an adjustment. You can see it swung rapidly, so I went down to a finer setting. Adjust here just a little bit more, and that's pretty much perfect right there. Okay, now let's go prograde. And we're going to circularize our orbit at apoapsis, and we'll do that manually. I could use burn time calculator, but I don't know how well burn time calculator will respond since I'm still in the HCLV. I wonder how much DV I've got left. Still really 2,000 meters? Seems like a waste to throw that away. This autopilot doesn't seem to handle the HCLV very well. You can see it oriented to prograde and then missed it. Now it's going back up, so that's a very inefficient use of fuel to be, up and down wobbling like that. Okay, but we are now prograde, so let's let's see how well burn time calculator handles it. So we'll go MD, time to apoapsis, click circularize. And then we'll slowly warp time forward at a factor of 10. And it looks like it's going to be about a 3-second burn? No, 30-second burn. Really? 30 seconds? That can't be right. Are we that low? Bringing up the other side of our orbit. Yeah, it was only a 3-second burn. Oh, total burn time. That's how much total time we have left. So there's something we could actually do here, because 2,486 meters per second, that's almost, I mean, that's the majority of the burn to go out to Mars. One thing I could do, I'm not going to do this because I don't feel like setting it up, but I think one thing I could do would be to set up the maneuver in transx using the way the vessel's set up, and it would basically raise our orbit, raise the other side of our orbit pretty far out. Then we would detach from the HCLV, and then as we came back around in the XR2, and we would be just in the XR2, then I could set up a new maneuver, you know, in other words, dump the old one and set up a new maneuver in the XR2, and then complete the burn, which would just be like 1,000 meters a second after that. Actually, maybe I'm kind of now that I say it, I'm kind of interested in doing it. Let me think about it for a second. The only problem with it might be that by raising our orbit out that far, obviously we're not gonna orbit the Earth in 90 minutes at that point. It might take a day or two to orbit. But fortunately, the opportunity to get to Mars isn't limited to just one day. You know, there's actually a couple of weeks in there. So we could do that, and we could still set everything up. You know what? Just for the sake of being completely different in this video, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the only downside to that, though, is that now my fuel calculations that I was so meticulous about are going to be wrong. Because we're going to have a lot more, if I use the fuel that's in the HCLV, I'm going to have a lot of DV left over. So, which way to do it? I'm thinking, just bear with me. Because on the one hand, if I detach from the HCLV, then it's going to be a cool mission because we're going to be really tight on DV. But on the other hand, it would be really cool to use the DV that's left in the HCLV, because then we would be doing something that's different and hasn't been done before. I guess actually for this flight, I'm going to go ahead and detach from the HCLV, and then in some other flight, I'll do it the other way that I'm talking about, where I go ahead and use the remaining fuel left over. But I don't want to do it this time because I was so meticulous about setting up the DV in the spreadsheet. All right, so stick to the plan. All right, Control J to detach the XR2. Let's just make sure that it's floating away. Or is it Shift J? I can't ever remember. Maybe it's just J. All right, let me switch then to the XR2.
Rotation. Translation.
Put in a little bit of translation. Okay, yeah, we're separating away from it. All right, let's get inside the XR2. Now we need to set up a maneuver for going to Mars. And we've got a bit of time to do it. If we don't get it set up between here and here, then we'll just have to go around the planet one more time. But I think we've got time to set it up, hopefully, and we've only got about 5 minutes left on this video, so let's hurry up. All right, transx on both sides. And let's go forward. Actually, no, we're fine where we're at on here. So VW over to escape plan here, VW over to yeah, okay. VW to maneuver on this side, maneuver mode on, and we need to copy a lot of the data that we have over there, starting with prograde. Actually, we need to get that out of here. So that's going to be 3588, and I got that number from the delta V that I see here. Now we're going to go to the date, and this is very sensitive, so we need to go back to like an ultra setting at first and swing that around. Need to go to the correct variable, go to ultra and swing the date around so that it lies over top of the eject date. And we can go to a hyper setting to make sure that it lines up a little bit better, but it's not real picky because we're going to be making changes anyway, but that just gets us, you know, ballpark. All right, now forward on this side, and why don't we have our graphics? That's weird, but not a problem. Outward is 0, so now let's 0 out plane change and 0 out prograde. And now we've got our graphics. Okay, now forward on this side to view the encounter. And now we go back over here, view the maneuver. And we'll just make a few changes to get everything set up. Could probably even use AutoMen for this, but since we're really close here already, I'm going to do it manually. Start with a bit of, actually we'll start with a bit of date. Okay. Let's go down to micro. Okay, so there we go with the date. And that's why it's not hugely important to have that yellow hypothetical laying straight over top of the other one, because you're going to adjust the date anyway. So just get it close. Actually, I also want to go to view setup and change graph projection to focus because I don't like that weird look. So this looks better to me. Now view back over to maneuver and continue adjusting some variables. Do an update. See if the bit of prograde is not helping, so let's go the other way with it. About right there. And what's the other variable change plane? Okay, that's not helping. Let's go the other way. And that's helping. So we'll continue to go there, maybe overshoot it a little bit in that direction, maybe a little more than that even. Now to prograde, and that's the wrong way. And we're getting very close. Let's overshoot the other way a bit. There we go. Play with the date a little bit more. And that's Mars. And let's put our focus PED right down the middle of Mars, something like that. Okay, so that is the plan set up. Let's bring up view target. We're still about 10 minutes away from the burn, actually more like 9. No, 600 seconds is 10 minutes, so we're more than 10 minutes out. Okay, let's take a look outside real quick. One thing I need to do, and I always almost forget.
Re-entry check. All systems green.
I need to open the radiator.
APU offline.
I could have blown the mission
Re-entry
again.
check. All systems green. Re-entry check.
I should have done that as soon as I achieved orbital velocity. I totally forgot about it. So we've been gone from Earth now for 20 minutes. So as soon as this radiator is open, we'll call it apart. Okay, radiator is open. And let's F8 over to the big view here. Let's make sure we have transx loaded, and we do. That way when we do our quick save, we don't lose our plan. If you don't have transx loaded on at least one side, then when you do a quick save, it doesn't save your plan. So that's bad. So Control S to save, Control P to pause, and that will be the end of this part. If If you like the video, please hit the like button down below, and please leave a comment. That's more important. I don't even care if you hit the like button, just leave comments. If you didn't like the video, make your opinion known by hitting the don't like. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe, if you like all this space-related stuff. And then you'll be notified when I upload new videos to YouTube. I also have a Facebook fan page. If you check the description down below there, you'll see a link to that. Like my Facebook fan page, and you can be notified through there as well when I upload new orbiter videos. Plus, you get to see other things like articles, videos, and other space-related content stuff that I don't get to post on my YouTube channel. See you in the next video.